Welcome, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome. So you all know who I am, Kim Marie. And what we're going to work with this afternoon is all about Saturn. So we're going to go through Saturn and most of the things that Saturn is doing right now in the sky today. I thought before we get started that it would be kind of interesting to go around the room and introduce ourselves and natal Saturn, transiting Saturn. So I'll start. Kim Marie. My natal Saturn is in Sagittarius in the 11th house. And of course, the Scorpio transiting Saturn is in my 9th house. And it is retrograde exact on my north node in the next week. So I have Saturn retrograde over my north node 3 times through this retrograde cycle. Yeah? And does Mom know, or should we go this way? Go this way? Okay. Oh, and here's the thing. Throughout this afternoon, we're going to use the talking stick, and it's not to hear each other. It's to get a good recording for people who cannot be here. So,
Hi, I'm Christy. Can you hear me?
Yeah. It's not to magnify your voice.
I'm just weird. My natal Saturn is in Leo in the 12th house, and the transiting Saturn is conjuncting my Uranus in the 3rd house, hitting my T-square.
Yeah.
And it's a heavy-duty one.
Hi, I'm Sandy, and my natal Saturn is in Libra in the 12th, and transiting Saturn is in the 1st, conjunct my Mercury.
We all got Saturn stuff going on.
I'm Kathy Bowman, and my Saturn is in Libra, conjunct my Venus, and transiting Saturn is in my 9th, and conjunct progressed moon, I think it is.
Mm.
I'm Nancy Rowan, and my natal Saturn is in my 10th, and conjunct my moon, square my sun, and my transiting is in the 12th house, in Scorpio.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm Medium Monk, and my Saturn in Scorpio resides in the 6th house, and transiting Saturn just snuck into my 7th house of relationships, opposing... Huh? 5th house, excuse me.
Yeah.
Okay.
5th house. Over your moon.
There you go.
Hi, my name's Lisa. I have Saturn in Aquarius in the 6th house, and Scorpio my 3rd with Neptune.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Donna McKay, and my Saturn is in Gemini in the 12th house, and it's transiting my Sun house, my 5th house right now, because I'm also a Scorpio.
All right.
Hi, my name is Chris, and my natal Saturn is in Libra, and it is going to be, it's in the 3rd house right now, or maybe it's in the 4th. What degree is it Saturn in right now?
It's
in the 4th, 10. It's just sorry, it's in the 10th house. I mean, it's my 4th house, transiting my 4th house, and it will be conjunct my sun in another year or so.
Mm-hmm.
This is Kathy Smith, and I use whole signs. So my Saturn is in the 10th, conjunct Uranus in the MC. And it is trine Neptune and sextile Pluto. And transiting Saturn is in my 3rd, sextile my Venus. And of course, Pluto's conjunct my Venus.
Hi, I'm Judy, and my natal Saturn is in the 7th house in Scorpio. And I didn't bring my chart, so I'm sorry. And I don't know yours, dear. I apologize.
That's okay. And this is Amber. Mom.
I'm Amber. I'm still learning. I'm still pretty green to this.
Mom and daughter. And so I'm going to pass this back to Media Monk. So if we have questions, again, we're going to use the talking stick, but it's for the tape, so we can pretty much all hear each other with that. So, nice, interesting mix. I heard natal Saturn in the 12th house like 3 times. Mm-hmm. So, that's an interesting, it's a Saturn-Neptune mix. And so that's a little interesting one. I'll kind of mention that for you. And so what I want to start out with, of course, is the archetype of Saturn from the perspective of evolutionary astrology, or EA as we call it. Saturn is oh. And everybody invite Mercury to the party, okay? Yeah. I'm just going to keep talking so you can. I think I just had to move these two receivers. Okay, so you got it? Yep. Okay. All right. And this is Izzy. If anybody doesn't know.
You should know Izzy's chart.
Miss Isabel. She's a sun in Scorpio. Okay. So she may have the Saturn transit over her sun right now.
Sorry.
Fine. You're absolutely fine. So Saturn is the individuated consciousness. Also, we'll say it's the structure of consciousness. So we all know Saturn as those boundaries of space-time. How we actually physically manifest things. Saturn is always going to be the structure of that. And so every other planet in our chart will relate to Saturn. And Saturn will then have the influence of showing us how that planetary archetype works. Like Saturn and Mercury. Saturn and Venus will structure how we go about meeting all of our needs, both essential needs internally within ourselves, needs through the Libra. All right? And Saturn is also that maturation process that all of us go through. Ourselves and mature in any with. So I like to joke, if you didn't have Saturn in your chart, you wouldn't have known how to show up here. Saturn following Jupiter, you'd have kept going down the road to the horizon. Saturn provides the container to all of these personal planets that all of us have. Now, Saturn also then is the boundary marker with what we will call the unconscious planets, moving into Chiron, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. And so Saturn, when it doesn't want to deal with something in our life, has a tendency to push it down below the surface into the unconsciousness. Saturn likes to hold that boundary of what is comfortable, what feels secure. And if something comes at us from one of those outer planets that we don't like, Saturn tries to put up the walls and hold it out. It's not quite successful with it, but it tries to. How many of us will have something with some relationship in our life and we need to speak up and tell them about it and have a conversation with us, and how many of us would just prefer to ignore, push it away? If I just ignore it, things. And what happens with those outer planets, especially Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, is they're always knocking on Saturn's door, going, well, wait a minute, you've got to look at this, all right? Uranus to Saturn will bust it out into smithereens and just blow it up into our faces. Neptune to Saturn is more subtle. It'll just dissolve all of the Saturnian boundaries or structures that don't work, and we'll be left feeling like we're naked or floating in an ocean, and, you know, where's the shore? And then Pluto to Saturn is kind of like Uranus in many ways, but Pluto will come in and just destroy anything that Saturn has built up that no longer works anymore. As you've read in traditional astrology, you know, Saturn is those physical structures of space-time, and when Saturn creates something in the physical world, it then attaches security to it. It doesn't want to let go of it. It doesn't want to move on. We all have our own Saturnian structures that, you know, don't rock my world. And so we need those three outer planets to break things down for Saturn many times that we don't want to release or let go of. Now, when we have Saturn retrograde natally in our chart, how many Saturn retrogrades? 1, 2, 3? Okay. When we have Saturn retrograde natally, the doors open to the unconsciousness. Retrograde Saturn doesn't have as much resistance to those three outer planets, or 4 if you want to include Chiron. All right? That Saturn retrograde will mean that there's been previous lives where we have had some resistance to letting go of old structures, or resistance to the maturation process. You know, something about Saturn was resisted in past lives. So if we come in with that retrograde, we may try to have resistance, but we're going to find out pretty early on through that process, usually around that first Saturn return, 28, 29 years, okay, that we can't. So we actually open that door to the unconsciousness. And we can actually slip through much easier. Now, if you have Saturn in a very strong aspect, tight aspect of some sort to Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto, that can have some effect in that direction. You're letting go of those Saturnian boundaries easier because those outer planets are having such an impact in your chart. Those 3 people who had Saturn in the 12th house, same thing. It's like you're going to open up and release resistance to letting go of things a little bit easier with that.
Retrograde in the 12th house, 'cause I am.
The other, there's 3 retrogrades, 3 Saturn retrogrades, but no, we also had some 12th house Saturns. Okay, we had some 12th house Saturns going around. Oh, okay. All right. In the 12th house, yes. So you're like, you know, that really, you know, all right, Neptune, here I am. You know, so Saturn is I have a Capricorn rising, so I've always liked Saturn. You know, I've always thought, you know, so much of your traditional astrology is just make Saturn so heavy. Evolutionary astrology doesn't look at any planetary archetype as right or wrong or good or bad. They're all the planetary are archetypes in consciousness. And we're just all the signs and the houses and the retrogrades and all that just tells us description of any of those archetypes. We all need Saturn. We all want to grow up. We all need to face that maturation process with Saturn. And so Saturn, as we look at Saturn through transit, as we are moving through any single lifetime, we all know we have that Saturn cycle that takes approximately 28, 29 years, this first Saturn return. Saturn making that first cycle around the natal chart allows us to become conscious in some way of whatever the karma is that our soul has brought with us in any particular lifetime. Doesn't mean we'll be completely successful at healing all of that karma, but it will allow it to come up into consciousness so that we can recognize those karmic patterns we all carry. So that Saturn return then, that first Saturn return, becomes an important marker in. It's like the universe giving us the rite of passage into adulthood. All right? And it's an interesting mix because if you go back to ancient societies in natural law, that rite of passage was at the Saturn opposition. We go back far enough, and by the time we were 13, 14, 15 years old, we were adults. We were, many of us, learning to have our first babies. We knew how to function out there in nature, in the wild. As we look at that Saturn cycle in more modern societies, we have lost many of the rites of passage for both girls and boys becoming young adults. We arbitrarily attach a number or a graduation from high school, and all of a sudden we're supposed to be adults, and we do nothing to really have that natural maturation that we used to have with Saturn anymore. And so how many of us as practicing astrologers, when we're drawing people in and they're approaching their middle 20s, oh, cell phones. So we have young adults now in their mid-20s, late 20s. They're approaching that first Saturn return. They're finally becoming an adult. They find themselves in a job. They can find themselves married. And in our world now, all of a sudden it's like, well, wait a minute. I know I'm supposed to be at this. I'm finally becoming an adult. However, I don't like my world. I married the wrong person. You know, I took the wrong college turn. And if we as society could work with that Saturn cycle, we'd have better functioning adults. The first Saturn square is where the soul naturally becomes aware of mortality and the life-death process. It is where there is a natural transference from the mother to the father. The first Saturn opposition is when there is the rebellion against authority, and we're searching to figure out how to become an independent soul and stand up for ourselves in some way. And then that last quarter Saturn square at about approximately 21 years of age, again, that's the whole cycle through the 20s where it's like, what am I doing? How am I going to be an adult in my world? That last Saturn square, Saturn to Saturn, is about surrendering to the limitations of yourself becoming a young adult and how you have to function in the world. Look at children today between 14 and 21. Who doesn't dream of being a millionaire and having your fancy car or all your clothes, you know, or, you know, young girls wanting to marry a doctor or a lawyer, you know, young boys wanting to be the next basketball star, you know, and you reach that age of 21 and look at the reality check or some of the letdowns that they'll go through. All of a sudden, many of them, some of them, graduating from college, and they're going, oh, what am I going to do now? You know, having to go out into the world. So there's so much about that first Saturn cycle that if we followed natural law, which is what astrology is, we could raise much more functioning adults in the world.
Well, that's because, you know, I mean, and I talk to people about, they don't know anything about astrology and like, what's that mean? And blah, 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 you know. I've often talked to people about their first Saturn return and what's going on, and they're just clueless because they don't know anything about astrology. But if that's true what you're saying, I mean, obviously. So the whole, everybody needs to have an education at an early age about what's going on.
Yes.
People don't accept astrology anyway, so what are you going to do?
Yes. We can have the we've had the suppression of astrology in the westernized world, but it's not going to go away. And there are many of us who feel with this Neptune-Pluto waxing sextile that we will have the renaissance of astrology coming back.
The 7-year itch, maybe in marriages, but that's
Yes.
Saturn.
Yes.
And people don't realize, but that's a common phrase, I think.
Yes.
Isn't Uranus a 7-year cycle, not Saturn? Isn't Saturn not
But
necessarily a 7-year cycle?
Uranus,
Squares.
yes,
And so that's
yes.
very common.
Yeah, the 7-year cycle is Uranus transiting through a sign of the zodiac, 7 times 12, 84, Uranus cycle. It's Uranus and Saturn. So here's the Saturnian realities. Oh, I don't need to hold this.
Well, why would anybody want to get married before they're 30 anyway? The whole generations do. I never got married, period. And I would never have gotten married before 30 anyway, because what person in their right mind would want to do such a thing?
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's like, listen, you have the whole rest of your life to do it, so do it when you're 40 or 50 so you don't have that much left to go.
What we have going on is all of the hormones. Those hormones hit at 14, and nowadays we're supposed to do abstinence.
Well, you were supposed to do it then, honey, not now, but then
Yes.
you were supposed to be doing it, and most
Yes.
people were then, I think, or a lot of people
Yeah.
were then. I mean,
Yeah.
my group was,
Yep.
they weren't interested in that at that time, I have to say, it wasn't
So let me keep us on track time-wise, all right? Otherwise, Saturn, I'll have you here till midnight. But that first Saturn cycle then, at that first Saturn return, we actually have the possibility, the potential to become conscious, Saturn, of all of the karmic history within our soul. That second Saturn cycle from 28-29 through the mid-50s is the productivity cycle with Saturn, and it is also the potential to do something about all the karma. And it's not that we're not addressing the karma the first Saturn cycle. We are. And we have a strong potential to address it at that Saturn return. But then that second Saturn cycle is really being a conscious adult, being able to address all of the soul karma with Saturn. And 35, 42, 49, and then into 56, those mid-50s. Those are all strong trigger points of, again, dealing with the karma. And so the second Saturn return, the potential is rewards. The potential is having 2 Saturn cycles of living in the world, living in our culture, in our societal conditionings. And as we approach that second Saturn return, being able to have the rewards of everything we've worked on through the second Saturn cycle. Some of us get it, some of us don't. There are variations when you're working with Saturn, in some of the harsher aspects, conjunctions, squares, oppositions, that you may find yourself delaying some of the Saturn maturations, or because of the harsh aspects and not being able to slide, you can meet some of those Saturn obligations earlier. The tense aspect brings it along. For instance, my natal Saturn, I told you, was Sagittarius 11th house. Venus is new phase Saturn, a conjunction. I have a Saturn-Venus conjunction in Sag. I was married before 21 and I was divorced by 26, 7 years. And I spent from 26 through 44 single, going through my karma clearings. Transiting Pluto went over my Saturn, and when it went over my Saturn, I brought in 2 distinct karma mates. Both of them were related to one of my jobs and occupations, and one of them karmically owed me. And that old boyfriend was how I got my other job. I have 2 businesses. And that was, he came in my life long enough to introduce me to this organization and help me start working there, and then he was gone. And then like a year or 2 later, when transiting Pluto went over my Venus, Leroy came into my life. And this all happened in my 40s. And I'm an 8th house Pluto, so if you knew my Saturnian reality and relationships and the karma mates and the karmic stuff, I would find myself going, whoa, how'd this happen? But then when Saturn finally moved over, or Pluto moved over, natal Saturn, natal Venus, what a shift. That Pluto blew everything up. But when it all settled down, wow, all of a sudden I had a mature relationship, Pluto over Venus, with Saturn. So my point is don't think you have to wait till your second Saturn return for the maturation process to give you your rewards. The potential is all the way through that second Saturn return. But the majority of that second Saturn cycle is productivity. We are an adult. We are functioning in the world. It is to go out there and work in that space-time, understanding what our limitations are in the physical world, and aligning with that and working with that. Then we move into that third Saturn cycle, and it really is, in our modern world, even the retirement cycle, the reward cycle. In other words, each Saturn cycle is meant to get smoother and smoother and smoother. We figured out how to be in the physical body. We figured out what our limitations are. We have figured out how to function with space-time. And so when you find yourself not being where you would want to sometimes be, it's to ask those Saturnian questions. What are my lessons here? How am I supposed to function? What are my realities? And of course, remember, your natal Saturn by sign and house, natal Saturn, sign and house, will give the bottom line on how you are functioning in space-time this time around. It will tell you your familial conditionings to a major degree. It will tell you how you are relating to societal conditionings and what societal conditionings you're coming from by way of past lives. It will show you even to some extent religious conditionings, although a lot of that can be Jupiter, Neptune. But Saturn will have a lot to do with what we will call on a broad basis environmental conditionings. And of course, we're always wanting to break free from those. Breaking free from those is going to be that polarity point of Saturn by natal house and sign. So natal Saturn, house and sign is where we're going to be comfortable in space-time reality. And wherever we find that natal signature uncomfortable, again, you want to look over to that polarity point for your objectivity and how to break free from any Saturn conditionings and limitations that you find. Mm-hmm.
I love the opposite side of where Saturn is anyway, though.
Yeah, many of us many of us will love the polarity point of Saturn by house and sign.
But my Saturn's not. I have 1, 10, and 20. I have 1, 10, and 20 degrees of Libra. I have 1 degree Venus Libra, 10 degrees Saturn Libra, 20 degrees Neptune Libra. They're all sitting. Actually, they're not all sitting in the third house because Venus is in the second, but Saturn and Neptune are in the third. Mm-hmm. But they're opposite. Saturn's opposite. My Jupiter and Moon are in the ninth. And of course, I love my Jupiter and Moon in the ninth in Aries. So I live in a place here, Arizona, Phoenix. Jupiter's on my midheaven, and Saturn's on my 4th house cusp. Exactly.
Oh,
here.
there you go.
So this has been a good place to live, but it's also had its downside too.
Yep. But just think about that. The polarity point of your natal Saturn by house and sign, that's gives you some objectivity to why you've created these limitations in your life, in the structure of your world. And it also can show you a way out of anything you consider to be limiting by Saturn, or the awareness of what your lessons are with this Saturn marker this time around. All right? And then again, by progression, we'll have natal Saturns go direct. We'll have direct Saturns go retrograde. And Saturn is, when Saturn transits, Saturn transits are retrograde for 4 months once a year. So if you have Saturn by progression make a change from direct to retrograde or vice versa, that's a once-in-a-lifetime thing for many of us. You're not going to live long enough to see it then go the other direction. And so if you're born with Saturn retrograde, and by progression it goes direct, that means you've thrown off the old realities. You've revisited what you need. And you can now go forward creating new structures of consciousness, new ways of functioning in the world. The opposite, those of us, the majority of us born with Saturn direct, if it goes retrograde by progression, then it means that you have reached limitations in this particular structure for you, and you've got to really start reviewing, throwing off. It gives you, if you have Saturn go retrograde by progression, I don't see that as a negative. It's like somebody's letting you out of the cage, break free, cut loose, sell the house, get the divorce, whatever it is, and go. So it's a nice way to just give you permission to do whatever that authoritarian voice in your head, Saturn saying, you can't do that, you can't do that. Oh yeah, watch me. And you can just go off and do it with that. Now, transiting Saturn. Again, Saturn is 29 and a half years to go around the zodiac. Many of us will live through multiple Saturn cycles. Saturn.
Many of us already have twice.
Yes, many of us. We've got a broad. I have to ask the young ones. How old are you? 25. And how old are you? 35. So we have one person who's yet to experience the first Saturn return. We have another one is experiencing the first quarter square Saturn for the second time with that. So, and then of course approaching.
Sorry.
As you know, natal Saturn in Sag, I'm approaching my second Saturn return. So is Media Monk. And
you youngsters, you.
I know, yeah, taha. Thank you for telling us that. And so we're a whole mix with these Saturn cycles. But transiting Saturn goes retrograde once a year for 4 months. And it moves forward in the calendar about 2 weeks every year. 2-3 weeks, it can vary. And so right now we have Saturn going retrograde in February, direct in July. And next year it'll go retrograde end of February, more towards the end of July. So that retrograde cycle is 4 months. And Saturn will typically reverse back over, 6 degrees, I think, approximately. It can vary a little bit in that regard, too. But it's enough for us. Saturn is one of those retrograde cycles we really notice. We notice when Saturn turns stationary retrograde. We notice when it turns stationary direct. And when it is stationary, either direction, it will slow down long enough that it's like a 3 or 4 day stationary, 5 right in there, that it just feels like it sits. It's stuck. I mean, we feel it. We feel that things are like, okay, this isn't going to go anywhere in my life. I might as well just sit down, relax, ask what's going on. When Saturn turns stationary retrograde, the door to the unconscious opens up for all of us. What I said about natal retrograde Saturn happens for all of us during its transit. Those 4 months that Saturn is retrograde, all of us can tap in to the unconsciousness easier. Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto can all bring the messages up to the surface for all of us. We've just got to be asking, what is it? Why? What's going on? Why won't reality go forward the way I want it to go forward right now? Now, let me talk about another archetype of Saturn, because it's just popping in as I'm explaining the retrograde. In evolutionary astrology, we'll correlate the planet, the sign, and the house interchangeably because they're archetypes in consciousness. So Saturn, Capricorn, 10th house is the same archetype. And we will many times hear about Saturn being, it's one of the archetypes that we will hear a relationship to melancholy and depression. That is a natural function for Saturn. And what happens when we all run through those time periods? Sometimes I'll say the word letdown because it doesn't seem as quite as triggering as depression. But depression is a natural function in human consciousness. And what happens is it draws us inward. We involute. And it draws us inward when we're relating it to Saturn, Capricorn, 10th, because something in space-time reality is no longer functioning correctly for us. And we are drawn inward because it's hard to go forward in that reality anymore. And when we involute, that is what draws in that unconsciousness to pop up and tell us why. It draws us in to say, why can I not function this way anymore? Why is this world not working for me anymore? Because remember, Saturn likes to be secure. Saturn likes that reality that's manifested for us. And we need that involution. We need that letdown depression from time to then allow us to recognize why the world isn't working for us out there anymore and what has to change inwardly. Remember, where Saturn's rulership is, the polarity is Moon, Cancer, 4th house. Outer security is only as good as inner security. So when Saturn involutes, it draws us back inward towards the moon and the emotional body and all the inner securities to then ask, what do I have to correct inside here? That then allows me to go back out into the world new ways. Every time Saturn's retrograde, that is a part of the natural cycle of Saturn retrograde. That's just a natural trigger of Saturn. How many of you can reflect upon time periods in your life where Saturn's went retrograde and you've went through a 2-week, a month, time period, or a couple of days if you're lucky, where you've went through a time period where it's just like, it's just like, God, I'm depressed. We've all experienced that, and you can reflect upon that through your cycles. If we can learn to see that as natural, then we can learn to work with it rather than resist it. All right? So then what we do as we're working through the Saturn transits, and we have Saturn go retrograde once a year, then the sign that it is functioning in is going to bring all the coloring for us. So, moving on. Saturn's transit through Scorpio. By the way, you're always welcome to ask questions, give feedback. No problem, okay? Oh yeah, no. You're welcome to interact. And what Leroy has a 50, just the talking stick, okay? My Media Monk is going to get Saturnian on me. And for those of you who don't know this, husband Leroy and I have a website, evolutionaryastrology.net. We publish a free podcast. Try to do once a week. We're going to try and do one Monday or Tuesday to make up for our 2 weeks on the road because we want to practice doing it mobily. And so when we're doing our podcast, I'm Star Lady. He's Media Monk. So those of you who know us that way.
Yeah, I missed out, but I realized you're here, so it makes it okay.
Yeah, you get us live in person. So anyway, that's where the Media Monk comes from, okay? Our little monikers in cyberspace. So working with the transits of Saturn as it moves through a sign, those are all, that's that evolutionary process from Aries to Pisces, beginning to end, of a collective maturation cycle that we're all going through. So all of us are adjusting Saturnian realities to Scorpio right now. Now Saturn went into Scorpio. Here's my little notepad. Saturn went October 5th. I don't even have to look for that one. Saturn went into Scorpio October 5th. It will be there through December 23rd, 2014. It will retrograde back into Scorpio June 15th, 2015, and it'll then go into Sag the second time, September 18th, 2015. All right, so let me give you the Saturn retrogrades, all right? February 18th, 2013, Saturn retrograde at 11 Scorpio 32 minutes. Direct, July 8th, 2013, 4 Scorpio 49. Next year's retrograde cycle, Saturn retrograde March 2nd, 2014, 23 Scorpio 19. Direct, July 20th, 16 Scorpio 39. And then Saturn will turn retrograde March 14th in 2015. 4 degrees Sag, 56 minutes. And it will go direct August 2nd, 2015. 28 Scorpio, 17 minutes.
Wait a minute. You said the 3rd of did you say the 14th of March it goes retrograde for Sag?
Yeah.
And it doesn't go direct till when?
2015, retrograde March 14th, 2015, 4:56 Sag, so 5 degrees Sag. Yeah. And it goes direct August 2nd.
Isn't that long?
4 months.
That's only 4 months.
March, April, May, June, July. Oh, that one is 5. That's. I might have a date wrong. Don't trust. Oh, no, March 14th, August 2nd. Yeah, we'll check it on the computer at a break. Yeah.
It can't be from March to August. I mean, that's too
March, April, May, June, July, August. Yeah. We'll check it at break.
That still doesn't matter. That's still too many months. What are you saying? What was the
We'll check it at break.
Okay,
We'll check it at break because my notes are the same.
Yeah, that's 6 months.
Yep. Let's just say Saturn retrograde 4 months is too long.
That's right, exactly. March to April, May, June, July, August. Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, it's 5 months.
We'll settle it. We'll look it up. We'll look it up retrograde. We'll look it up in the ephemera. Nancy will have the paper
I'm only saying
ephemeras.
because I don't want to be in that retrograde that long.
No.
It's okay.
No.
Whatever.
No, I know.
It seems like it's a long time to me.
Maybe that's what you have to learn.
Listen to the Saturnian conversation going on and the resistance to it.
Actually, you just said what the good points were of it going retrograde, so it actually sounds good to be retrograde anyway, you know?
Yes.
And I don't think it bothers me one way or the other because it's retrograde right now and it's
Yes.
not doing
Yes.
anything different than
Yes.
anything else.
Yes.
You
We
know?
adjust.
It's just
We
the same.
adjust. We all subtly go through the old realities that are no longer working, and when we get the cataclysm of the old reality no longer working, we adjust. We make our way through it.
It's just that it's going retrograde on in the 3/14 and 15, it goes retrograde on my Mercury.
We'll enjoy this one.
I wasn't going to get to anyway, you know? It's all good.
Yes, it's all good.
It's all good.
It's all good. That's what we have to name it. And so I want to work with that Scorpio archetype until medium monk. I got 10, 15 minutes. All right, let's move through that Scorpio archetype, and then we'll take a short break because of the tape change. So Scorpio, modern ruler is Pluto. Those of you who know evolutionary astrology know Pluto, Scorpio, 8th house. This is the archetype of the soul. Soul has that dual desire nature to separate that from that which created it, return. And those two conflicting desires create each and every incarnation we have. Exhausting, separating desire after separating desire. New lover, new car, new job. You know, eventually, why am I here? What are my lessons? So Scorpio, in traditional astrology, is known as an intense water sign. It's fixed water. And so Scorpio wants emotional security. If we weren't invested in emotional security, we could come here, get it done in one lifetime, and shoot ourselves up to nirvana. But look at how many times we cycle back around because we want to be secure. So Scorpio is an emotional sign that really requires us to look at the boundaries of what constitutes emotional security for us. Scorpio is where we run up against the forces of the universe that are greater than us. We run up against our own limitations. Just like Scorpio and its relationship to the soul will relate to those dual desires, separating desires, returning desires. By the way, each and every desire we have in manifestation is a separating desire. So we can take the judgments out of that. And the returning desire is to know source energy. Creator, Great Spirit, God, Goddess, whatever you want to call it. And so just as we know those separating, returning desires, Scorpio is also that archetype where we understand separating forces, returning forces. Okay? And it's what the Bible would call good and evil. But in natural law language, broaden it out to the big philosophical understanding. And this is going to bring in a little bit of Pisces Virgo for you, okay? But I think that this is helpful for us with Scorpio because we're going to add on Pluto and Capricorn. So we're looking at a big subject right here. Look at this Piscean question. Why would something perfect create this mess?
I always say that from day one.
Why would something perfect create imperfection? The entire reason for the Big Bang, 14 billion years ago, if you want to look at it that way, was the unmanifest desire to manifest in its own desire to evolve and perfect itself. This has been one of the big distortions of human-made religions. There's a old man up there with a long white beard sitting on a cloud. And we've bought into the fact that he's perfect. And we've bought into the fact that we're imperfect. Well, that's pretty easy to recognize, isn't it? We are. And so, but what human-made religions have done is conditioned us to believe that that with this imperfection, you know, we're doomed, we're stuck. And so we've come through the last 2,000 years of the Piscean Age with all of this conditioning of guilt at our imperfections. 2 responses. One response is atonement. I must suffer. I must atone. I must make amends. That's the victimization side and the masochistic side of the conditioned guilt. The other side is anger. How dare they? How dare they hurt me? I'm going to get them before they can get me. That is the victor or the sadistic side. Sadomasochism stems directly from human-made religions. And so we've got to open up and recognize that, yes, there is imperfection here. We're here for the process of perfecting. And there isn't a one of us who can sit there in the monastery and pray long enough or hard enough to perfect. It has to be done through the life experiences, or what EA will call the path of the householder. Evolution takes place through the emotional body. Back to Scorpio. Scorpio must have the emotional experiences of these dual desires. So when we run up against the forces of power that are greater than us, and Scorpio wants to merge with that greater force of power to osmosis something into it that it was not before the merging. So when Scorpio merges with another to become more than it was, it has a choice. If it wants to merge with the separating forces in the universe, there's the dark side of Scorpio. There's all the distortions that will come up sexually, you know, black magic, evil, all that kind of stuff. Scorpio, though, also can choose to merge with the returning forces of power. And that's where you get everything good that you read about Scorpio. And those are the souls that empower others rather than take power away. So Scorpio is those extremes of the forces of power. We all have an 8th house. We all have Scorpio in our chart. And we all have Pluto. So we all have this battle going on within us between separating and returning forces. And we're all having to exert a conscious willpower, a conscious effort in choosing the light. Does this make sense? So there's the archetype of Scorpio. Now you understand the manipulations. Now you understand the empowerment. Now you understand all of those things that are going through with Scorpio. So add Saturn into Scorpio. And all of a sudden, you know, Saturn's going, whoa, it's really heavy emotions here. Oh, man. And what'll happen, Saturn and Scorpio, is it'll touch into all those emotional fears. And those emotional fears are the ones that our rug is being pulled out from underneath our feet. Our security mechanisms that we've learned how to function with in the world, all of a sudden have just been wiped out underneath us. And so Saturn and Scorpio is just, it'll trigger all of the emotional fears and securities to have us, you know, again, the bottom's falling out. So we're all reaching. We're all just reaching for whatever we can grab onto and feel secure with Saturn. And Saturn in Scorpio is going to want to reach for the past because it's stabilized. It's where we came from. It's what makes us, you know, feel like we have some sense of stability. And yet, because Scorpio is the essence of metamorphosis, those rugs get pulled out underneath our feet for a reason. It's because we've worn out that emotional security structure and we're needing to go forward. We're needing to find a new source of power that we can merge with in new ways and take ourselves to a new level of inner emotional security. And then as we do that, Saturn then metamorphoses its structures out there. Outer follows inner. Inners first, outers a reflection. So Saturn in Scorpio is tugging at everybody's inner security systems on deep emotional levels, and then asking us to meet our own fears and osmosis them into greater levels of self-reliance. Question?
So where do we find those emotional securities? Do we find that through oppositions? Do we find that?
The opposition to Scorpio is Taurus, and that is finding self-reliance on an inner level. Physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. Taurus self-reliance is all 4 levels, all right? We're going to have a tape change, and I'm going to leave us in suspense.